were interviewed on matters of faith. Christians and non-Christians alike threw up some really interesting results, but one of those was, what are the 6 biggest questions people are asking? And one of them is, what should I do with my life? So we're gonna try and tackle that one. I want to tackle it with a really sad letter that I read. It was not written to me, it was written to a pastor of another church, and he gave a response. But I want to read to you the letter that I think kind of taps into the way a lot of us perhaps think with regard to what should I do with my life. This is what it said. The fact is that I've already wasted my life, or it at least feels that way. For decades, I've tried a variety of different careers and none of them worked. I tried starting my own business for over 20 years while my wife worked. I earned a PhD. I moved to a country where I didn't speak the language and I had a mental breakdown. Several years later, my wife and I separated. I'm now 64. I live in a small caravan and I do work that any 18-year-old could do, or at least those are my boss's words. Every day feels like nothing more than an exercise in waking up in the morning, getting through the day, and going to bed at night. What advice can you give to someone who has already wasted their life? Isn't that a sad letter? A sad way to look at your life? I want to give you Jesus' response, because I think this question, it just taps into so many of the anxieties we all have, whether you're young and looking at the hopefully decades and decades of fruitful life you've got ahead of you, and you're like, but what if I make the wrong decision here? Well, there's so many options and I just don't know what to do. Or perhaps you're further on in life and you're like, I didn't really mean to do all that, and I'm here now. What do I do? What should I do with my life? There's a really short poem that I think kind of, for me, is both inspirational, but it does carry this sort of challenge. It's written by a cricketer turned missionary called C.T. Studd. I have the clicker, don't I? And it's a short one. It goes like, could you hit the thing? It goes like this. Only one life, 'twill soon pass, and only what's done for Christ will last. Kind of challenging words, kind of words that give you a bit of direction. Jesus answers the question, what should you do with your life, though? And I found that really helpful, because I thought, brilliant. He answered the question, and then I just tell them what he said. And what he said is this. So Matthew 16, verse 25, it's just one verse. Jesus doesn't phrase it as what should I do, but like, how do I save my life? How do I make my life a life worth living? How do I save my life? He says, for whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. So Jesus says, what should you do with your life? Lose it. Like, lose it. All those big hopes and dreams that you are going to be and do, and it's about you and your desires and you. Jesus says, yeah, lose it. Just lose it. And when you do that, you're going to find that it's saved in Christ. But if you hold on to your life and it's whatever the thing is for you, it's the power or the attractive spouse or the money or the influence or the on the good things too. I want to have a family that's happy and a nice house with spare rooms for them to stay. All of those things that we kind of want. If we work our lives to get that stuff, Jesus says, you're going to lose it. You're going to get to a certain point, look around and go, this does not fulfill. But lose your life and you're going to find it. So we're going to open this up. I want to start off with a bit of a visual illustration. It's what I did here about 7 years ago, I think. And it's my favourite illustration, full stop, that I've ever seen, that I've ever done. I stole it from someone else. Every great illustration I've ever done, I've stolen from someone else. But I want to do it for you today. I want to kind of make the point today. That's James. Are you ready to come up? Okay. Right. So James is going to come up, and we're going to just give James his life and everything that matters to him. So I kind of debated about what I could use for this, so we're going to go with these here props. It's a kind of a proppy Sunday. So James, this is your career, it's very important, so hold on to that. This is, because it's all your wealth, similar, because obviously your career has earned that wealth. This is your wonderful wife and family, they're important too. This one's wet, so this is like your peace of mind, I guess. James is doing well. James has got a lot of stuff, okay? And he's carrying that around, and it's good. None of it's bad stuff. I'm just aware that I'm sort of breathing into this microphone a lot, what I might do. Swap over to this microphone, and then I sound less breathy. Now this is one of, if not the most precious things I own, for two reasons. This is the perfect sized mug to make a cup of tea, because if I make a cup of tea in this, it's still hot by the time I get to the end of it, whereas in a big mug, you're left with lukewarm tea, and it doesn't taste so great, okay? It's also a mug that Hannah's dad bought in 1973, and I'm sure you're all aware that in 1973, Sunderland won the FA Cup. It is the only time Sunderland have won the FA Cup post-World War II, and any major trophy at all. So, he bought this on the way to the match where Sunderland beat Leeds United 1-0, as I'm sure you all knew. So this mug is older than me. This mug is, I can't do the maths, it's almost 50 years old. It's still a great mug. It's still, it carries with it the heritage of the finest football team in the land. This is a precious, precious mug. If this came James's way, something would have to change. So when something so precious comes your way, you lose everything else. You drop everything else. I'm so grateful you thought that. Cool. So, I want to base the main chunk of what I'm saying around one verse that it's a bit of an innocuous verse, but it just, I think, says so much about what happens when you encounter Jesus and what should you do with your life. Could you hit the next slide, please? The verse is this, it's a really simple one. It is, it's from Matthew 9, and it's verse 9. So it says this: as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. So there's 3 points I want to make. I want to make them really clearly, perhaps slightly firmly, because sometimes people ask for some advice, and I give them some advice, and then they go, "Thank you." And then 2 weeks later I say, "Did you do the thing?" And they go, "No." So here we go. These are the 3 main points we're going to get out of this verse. Do not fret and linger on the things of the past. Matthew was a tax collector. He did not live the rest of his life wishing and fretting that he wasn't a tax collector previously. Second point is follow Jesus. Jesus said to Matthew, "Follow me." And then Matthew got up and followed Jesus. And the third one, and the one I'm going to just push really hard on at the end, is remove yourself from the center of the story. Our brains are wired to place ourselves in the middle of the narrative where it's about me. And God's redemptive plan for the world started when I was born. And then this is not really about you. You're the prize he won. You're the prisoner he brought back. It's his great big story. That's the third point. So, move on from the past, a really important one. Matthew had a past. Matthew was a tax collector. Which doesn't really, I know we don't like tax collectors because the whole concept of paying taxes, it's unpleasant because it takes our money, but you may have heard this before. In gospel times, tax collectors were like social traitors. They were Jewish. It's what the Romans would do. They would move into a culture and use people from that culture to administer the culture. But it meant that a Jewish person like Matthew would go, I am going to take my orders from the Romans. I will essentially lie, cheat and steal to my own people so that they will give me all the money, which I will then give Rome their cut, and I will keep the rest for myself. And that's how he would end up getting paid and getting rich. Now the Jewish people would hate this. Tax collectors were like the worst of the worst. They couldn't go and attack them or do anything because the Romans had their back. And if you did, you would be attacked by a centurion or whatever. And it was for the culture of the time, the worst, most despicable kind of a person is a tax collector. For our culture, think in terms of sort of neo-Nazis, paedophiles, that kind of thing. The things that we just go, oh, that's awful. These are the people we don't like as a culture. That's what tax collector was. Matthew had a past. But none of that disqualified Matthew from following Jesus. That same invitation, follow me, to the worst kind of person, is extended to you and I, and it's extended to every person we come into contact with. So once you decided to follow Jesus, don't fret over the past. Paul writes in Philippians 3:13-14, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead, I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Surely Paul said, forgetting what is behind, because it's a real issue for us. We often go, oh, I just wish I hadn't done that. The person I was is so awful. But then again in 2 Corinthians, Paul writes, he's like, look, Christ leads us in triumphal procession. That's another Roman image where he's like, imagine Jesus is like a general that's won a war. He's won the victory, and you were like the enemies of God. And so what the Romans would do is they would like process on a big horse through the city, leading people, and then look at the prisoners, look at the people, look at the kings and the armies I've defeated and I've brought back. But then it says, but then you become this sweet fragrance. And it becomes like, look who I brought back. Look at what they were, and now they're on my side. They were dead, but now they're alive. They were lost, but now I'm found. The past, the bad stuff, the stuff we instinctively want to be so ashamed of, Jesus is like, look what I redeemed. Nikki brought a word just now about a shell that was so crusted over and so beaten up and covered in stuff that, like, it's just, you couldn't even see it was a shell anymore. My challenge is, and this is what I tried to say when I forgot how to spell, my challenge to you today is like, if that spoke to you, don't keep looking at all the muck and the mud. Don't focus on the chips and the broken things. You lift your eyes and you focus on Jesus and all of those cracked and broken things in your life. Somehow, God uses them to work this like peculiar kind of glory in which it's like they get filled with something that bit more precious. The redeemed sinner somehow just sings with greater worship and greater, just reveals the glory of God in a way that those who never sin somehow don't. The redeemed and restored are evidence of God's mercy and grace. Patience with us, and it's wonderful. So there's this kind of, I can't remember the name of it, but there's this like art form where they take a broken bowl or a broken vase or something, and where all the cracks and the broken bits are, they put it all together. And the thing they put it all together with is, it's kind of a mix of glue, but gold. They fill it with gold, and it becomes more beautiful, and the cracks become the beauty. So we don't fret over what happened before. When Jesus says, follow me with your life, leave behind what is behind, and we follow him. They say you become what you behold. So don't behold too hard your past. Don't behold your life. Behold Jesus. Look at Jesus. And what you'll find is you become so much more like Jesus. That's a big thing. I know I'm kind of breezing past it, but I want to go for the second one. The second point is follow Jesus. It simply says it. He says, follow me. And Matthew rose and followed him. And I want to get really practical from this point on. Just we've done some big picture stuff. The idea of what do you do with the rest of your life? You're going to lose it. That's big picture. Let's just do some practical stuff from here on to the end. What does it mean to follow Jesus? Two things I'm going to pick out. First of all, spend time with him. Spend time with him in the Word. Read all about him. Actually read your Bible. I love that you're here on a Sunday morning. I love it. I love that you're here listening to me read the Word. I want you to read the Bible for yourself. Spend time with him. Pray with him. Matthew 6 verse 6 says, go to your room, shut the door, and pray to your Father in secret. And your Father hears you in secret. And then do you know what? When you're done praying, you don't need to tell anyone you were praying. Because you weren't praying to them. You could have been praying for them, but you weren't praying to them. You were praying to your Father. So spend time with Jesus. Listen to him. Spend time with him. Spend time with his Word. The second thing is, Jesus says it in John 14:15. If you love me, obey what I say. If you love me, you'll listen to me. Obey my commandments. So if you're actually serious about following Jesus with the rest of your life, then read what he says and do it. Can't really make it more plain than that. So there might be a strain still in this question, right? Like, I love Jesus. I want to live my life for him. I really do want to walk after him, but I don't know what to do. What is my calling? Especially among young Christians, this is a question. I'm waiting for my calling. I want the lights in the sky, or the clear thing, or perhaps I'm eating my cereal and all my cornflakes just spell out a word. What is my calling, God? Is it to go to this country, or set this up, or do this? What is my calling, God? Tell me what I am called to. A couple of points on this, practical points. First of all, 1 Corinthians 7:17 says this: let each person live the life the Lord has assigned to him. So far, so good. Well, what life have you assigned to me? And to which God has called him. Now, that surely means you are not called to a thing, like a job or a role or a vocation. Your life is your calling. The people around you are your calling. Where you're at in life now is your calling for now. Whether you are young or old, whether you're employed or retired or otherwise, your calling is to those who are around you and to the life that you have. If you feel a calling to go and tell people about Jesus in a far-flung world, right? I think God's going to take me to Papua New Guinea and evangelize everyone, tell everyone about Jesus. But while you're here, tell everyone about Jesus. Because if you're not doing it here, you're going to struggle to do it there. And if you're not doing it here, but you'll only do it over there, where's your heart at? Because if it's in the glory and the glamour of being the missionary, you're going to struggle. If it's a deep-seated love for Jesus while you're here, and you go do it there, but while you're here, do it here. Also, you'll get better at it, because we all suck when we start, right? It's terrible not to do, practice. And your life is what you are called to. John Calvin writes in his big old book, The Institutes, he says, God commands each of us to consider his calling in every act of life. Okay, so that's my first bit of advice. What do you actually do? Your life. Life is your calling. It's not just the one bit. It's not the thing that someone's going to write a book about you. It's your whole life. Second thing, build your pattern of life around the local church. Yes, I know I'm in church leadership, so I'm going to say that, but do it. Build your pattern of life around the local church. Okay, it's not like the big church that you watch on YouTube that has really nice lights and sound systems and stuff, and no one ever crawls into tents and won't get out. Like The local church. The church, well, this is not just because like I'm preaching here, because in the local church, you get to follow Jesus together, right? And you're different to the people around you. And you get to go, do you know what? You are really good at job. You are so encouraging. You are really patient. You are prophetically gifted. You are this. And you get to just gain so much from these people around you, and then they do the same for you. You are so caring. And you build each other up, and we need each other, and we use the fact that we have each other to follow Christ, and somehow we just all become that bit more like Jesus, to him who is the head of the church. And another thing is, in the local church, you get to be known and know others. And by that I mean, like, you can be encouraged and challenged and be held to account by people. Like, I know you, and something's not right, and I'm going to challenge you, and you need to talk to someone about that thing. Do you see what I mean? If you're just a lone ranger, you don't have that. And of course there are people who seem to have a bit of a lone ranger story where they went off and they did the most amazing things for God. And we read books about them. Helen tells us books about them. And they're really, really great. And people like sort of Amy Carmichael or Brother Young, if you know, The Heavenly Man, it's amazing. Jackie Pullinger, Chasing the Dragon, that's a great book. But I just say three things about all of these people, all of these incredible people who sort of go out on a limb for Jesus and seem to be kind of on their own. These are 3 points that we can miss. Firstly, they all, I can't think of a single one who doesn't suffer immensely in that path of obedience. It's part of what God has for them. It's not something to envy though. It's tough. Secondly, they're very unusual. Like they're not the majority of Christians. They are unusual. So we read books about them because they're unusual. And thirdly, all of them plug into a local church when they're at home, or when they get the chance, or when they're kind of they're aware of the local church, because there might be somewhere where it's not legal to gather together. So these Christians, they are to be admired, but please never take a lesson from them that it's a good idea to rush off and not be plugged into the local body of Christ. That's point 2. So point 1, hopefully remember your whole life is your calling. Point 2, build your pattern of life around the local church. Point 3, if you want to know your calling, it's because, Lord, I need some specific guidance. I need some promises over my life. Get some prophetic people around you that you trust. There is a lot the Bible has to say on prophets that just tell you what you want to hear. That is it's not pleasant imagery. Jeremiah 23 will surprise you, but it's just, if prophets that say what you want to hear, that's not prophecy. Prophets that listen and humbly will tell you what they feel the Lord is saying, they are people worth listening to. And a point aside perhaps is, you then weigh the words you hear. So I remember years ago, it was just before I met Hannah. She was going to the Gateway Church in King's Lynn, and a prophet came and prophesied over Hannah and he said, do you know, you are going to one day lead young people through dance. And Hannah was like, no, I am not. Not a chance am I ever going to be into dance. And she weighed the word. It was given in good faith by a trusted prophet. They got it wrong, and that's all right. And Hannah just politely said, thank you very much, and laid that one down. However, time and again, we have had words spoken over us as a couple and individually, which we've held on to these promises through tough times when it's like, often I found you get a promise from God through a prophet and you're like, do you know what, that feels right, that resonates with me. I can't see it in the physical, but it's coming. Somehow the Lord's going to do this thing. Then what God often does is lead you into a place where that thing becomes just even more impossible. You're like, you said I would be doing that, and I'm this far away from it, and now I'm like this far away from it. And God's like, yeah, I know, that's what I do, it's fine. And then he makes it happen. That just seems to be a strange pattern. It happens in the Bible. I've seen it in my own life and the lives of others. It's just kind of, I don't know, either God's sense of humour or there's probably something really profound in it. And he hasn't forsaken you if that happens. But if you're not walking with any promises over your life, perhaps grab 2 or 3 prophetic people, we have them in our church, and get them to just pray and prophesy over you. See what they say. And then listen to what's the Holy Spirit saying in you. It might be that you go, thank you, but no. Or you might be like, that sounds impossible, but somehow yes. And those are the words we hold on to. And 4th and final point, just on following Jesus. With regards to what's my calling, where do I go, what do I do? John Piper advises that you consider your holy desires. And it sounds really odd, I think it's an odd phrase, but when you're walking in holiness, when you are just, your relationship with Jesus is wonderful, and you're worshipping, and there's an idea, or there's a thing, there's a something that keeps coming to you perhaps. But listen to that. It may be just the Lord just encouraging you in a direction. If you're, sort of backsliding, really struggling, and there's another thing that sounds quite attractive, that's probably not the thing to follow. But in the time of holiness, when you are walking with the Lord well, what's He saying to you in that time? It's just a desire. God, I just really want to reach those kinds of people. God, I think I could go and do this for you, Lord. And it almost, the more the Lord's presence in your life intensifies, the more that intensifies that. Perhaps that's something to look into. But just to repeat, if perhaps you're struggling with some sin and it's your relationship with God is just not going so well and you've got a bit of time you want to spend with Him and there's another desire, don't run after that one. Keep it holy. Anyway, so those are my sort of key points on just following Jesus. The last point is really simple, but hopefully this lands and you hold on to this. With the question, what do I do with my life? And Jesus says, go lose it. It's because we need to take ourselves out of the centre of the story. It's not about you. If God is, I am. Do you know what you are? You're I am not. Yeah, you're not the centre of the universe. I'm sorry. I'm not the centre of the universe. When you just grasp that, it is freeing. Because what if your life doesn't end with the biggest, most amazing and wonderful thing? What if your life ends with you walking in the path of obedience and then being received into the arms of Jesus and He's like, hey, let's go to eternity together now. Isn't that like pressure off? You don't have to get it perfect. It's not, the centre of the story is not about you. Do you know who wrote the book of Matthew? Matthew, right? And Matthew appears in this verse. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth and said to him, follow me. And he rose and followed him. And I wonder how many of the times Matthew writes about Matthew. So I I used Bible Gateway, and I wrote the word Matthew. Matthew appears about a verse or two later when Jesus has dinner at his house. That's not the point of that story. And then at another point there's a list of the 12 disciples. Matthew never mentions Matthew again. If we didn't have that Matthew wrote the book of Matthew, I think you'd be there with like Bartholomew or Thaddeus, the ones you'll forget, right? If they forget your name, and in 2 generations no one really knows you ever lived, but people know Jesus because you lived. And Jesus was worshipped because you lived. Isn't that worth it? Isn't that worth it? I'm like preaching to myself because I want to get my heart to a point where I'm like, if I am completely forgotten the moment I die, but Jesus is more glorified through my life, that's a good life. That's a life worth living. If they never write a book about me, if my grandchildren forget to tell my great-grandchildren that I ever lived, or whatever it is, but more people know Jesus. And Jesus is more glorified through my life. That's a way I can live. I just say this at the end. There will be points in life when you go, Jesus, I don't know what I'm doing at this period. I don't know what I'm meant to do with this period of my life. And the answer is really simple. It's just live for Him. Just live each day for him. Do not hold on to the great big adventure that might happen in 6 months' time. You live for him now. And there will be points when he asks you to do something. My experience is the more surprising or sort of bigger the leap, the more clearly he tells you. It's rarely, if ever, glamorous. But when you're following him, it's always glorious. You know, it's not going to look cool, pretty, or wow, man, you are. No, it's going to look humble and simple. And then when you sit back and you go, man, Jesus, you led me to this thing. You led me to do that thing I'd have never done, and look what you did. He knows everything. He does amazing things. He tells you where to go. It surprises you. It will always look just a bit flat, I think. But it's glorious because he works in our weakness. That's all I've got to say on all of that. So I'm going to stop talking. Could you put the questions up, please? We're going to do as we've been doing the last few weeks and just finish with some questions to consider. So they're on the screen. Talk to the people around you. If there's someone near you that you don't know, why don't you talk to them? And just say like what from today was most helpful for you, and have a little chat about that, and then you share. And which of those lists of those things about following Jesus is most helpful. And then we'll finish the service in 5 minutes.